Hello and welcome back to Ike the Frontliners. You may ask what's happened to your download sequel? You haven't been downloading anything for 1 month. Well, let me explain. So my school finally opened after that pandemic all over the globe. Finally, I got to make a video because even though my normal download sequel is one video per week, but right now it's pretty bad. I try to get it back to point. And before we start our topic, well, let's have a look at this. I make a decoration and a prop for my video. This is not the start of this video, of course. The start of this video would be the topic of this episode. The topic of this episode is one of my favorite topics for World War II. It's the battle that changed the course of the Pacific, the Battle of Midway. Yeah, so let's have a look at what happened in 1941 before the Battle of Midway. So as everyone knows, December 7, 1941, when the Japanese did a surprise attack on the US base of Pearl Harbor on Hawaii, the Japanese did the attack purely by aviation. This shows how much naval warfare has changed. Back around 30 years ago, when World War I is going on, and during the 19th century, the Battle of Tsushima, for example, the naval warfare still using big battleships with big cannons, making an artillery do from a long range and hitting each other with large shells. Aviation have changed, and naval warfare have too. Aviation with their warplane are becoming stronger and able to sink big ships with just bombs and torpedoes, making them extremely powerful for World War II. During the battle that the Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, they used 6 big fleet carriers. These are the Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, Suikaku, and the Shokaku. Yes. These 6 fleet carriers are extremely powerful and modern for the Japanese Empire. And compared to the US at the time have 5 carriers, but only 4 were operational at the time. These are the Hornet, Yorktown, Enterprise, Saratoga, and the Lexington. But at the time the Saratoga is not operational, so I would call it 4. So, before the Battle of Midway, one crucial battle had happened only some months between. That is the Battle of the Coral Sea. During the Battle of the Coral Sea, the US have sent in 2 carriers, meanwhile the Japanese had three carriers in the battle. During that battle, the Shokaku and Suikaku being the main carrier fleet, they were able to sink the Lexington and damage the Yorktown severely. The problem is, right now, the US only have 2 operational aircraft carriers. But even though that the Yorktown was severely damaged, and the damage is beyond repair to be in time for the Battle of Midway, the engineering miracle happened. To repair Yorktown, they need at least 3 months in reality. But somehow the engineering of the US managed to put her up back in action in 3 bloody days. I don't even know how they do that, but it's impressive. You need the ship that is that damaged and needs so much repair were able to put back in action in just 3 days. So let's have a look at the US power and statistic during the Battle of Midway. During the Battle of Midway, the US deployed 3 aircraft carriers. These are 3 fleet aircraft carriers. The USS Yorktown, Hornet, and Enterprise. These 3 are all sister ships, the part of the Yorktown class aircraft carriers. These 3 have 8 5-inch gun as an anti-aircraft as the main anti-aircraft cannons, and they were able to carry up to 70 aircraft. So, let's have a look at the aircraft during the Battle Midway for the US. The TBD Devastator, the best torpedo bomber in the entire world. It's the worst aircraft in the entire world. It's don't really do its job very well. First, being a very obsolete for its time, bloody slow and weak defensive armament, and even worse, the torpedo that is carried, the Mark 13, won't even do its job very well because the Mark 13 is obsolete. It's not reliable, the fuse always die when you don't want it to. When somehow you were able to drop the Mark 13 and it didn't sunk into deep water and stop working, and it somehow got to the enemy ship, the fuse will refuse to work. Okay, second aircraft, no very good fighter for the US during the early Pacific War, that is the F-4F Wildcats. The F-4F Wildcats is well known for having good maneuverability and quite an okay speed. The aircraft were equipped with 6 12.7mm Browning machine guns. These are very effective for the Pacific War, and literally all US aircraft were equipped with these 12.7mm Browning machine guns. The Wildcat got 6 of these and it come out pretty well. The only flaw that I saw in the Wildcat is the speed and the maneuverability cannot match the Japanese Zero. We'll have a look at the Japanese Zero in a minute. Let's have a look at the third aircraft in the Battle Midway. So the third aircraft that I definitely have to mention is definitely the SPD Dauntless. The SPD Dauntless play a big role during the Battle Midway and also during all the Pacific Theater battle until it will be succeeded by the SPD Helldiver. But before the SPD Helldiver come to replace the Dauntless done very well in all battles. The Dauntless have been equipped with 2 50 caliber machine guns in the front and 2 30 caliber machine guns in the rear for anti-aircraft purposes. Still, the Dauntless bomb load are impressive. 1,000 pounds of bomb can be put in the belly of the aircraft for dive bombing. But even though that during the battle the US have only 3 aircraft carriers compared to Japan that they have 4, still the US still have one big advantage, and that is the Midway Island itself. The Midway Island itself serves as an airfield, which means they can launch an air attack against the Japanese fleet as well.
Confer to every breeze from the dawn to setting sun. We have fought in every clime and place.
During the Battle of Midway, the US deployed 2 task forces. The first one, Task Force 16, commanded by Admiral Raymond. The second task force, Task Force 17, commanded by Admiral Fletcher. Now let's have a look at the Japanese naval power during the Battle of Midway. During the Battle of Midway, the Japanese deployed 6 task forces. The first task force is the Mobile Task Forces. In this task force, the Japanese deploy 4 aircraft carriers and 2 battleships. These 4 aircraft carriers are, of course, the Akagi, Kaga, Hiryu, and Soryu. The total amount of aircraft that these 4 carriers can carry are 234 aircraft. Now let me have a look at the Japanese aircraft. So the first major aircraft, the D-3A1 Val dive bomber. it don't actually have the name Val in Japanese. The Val is the name that it was given to by the US troop. The Val dive bomber performed quite well during Pearl Harbor attack, and it done quite well in the battle for the Coral Sea. But the D3A Val will be outdated in a matter of years after the Battle of Midway. Now let's have a look at the second aircraft. The second aircraft is the B5N2 Kate. B5N2 Kate is very well known to be an early Japanese torpedo bomber for the carrier group. The B5N2 are quite slow and have a weak anti-aircraft armament, but it wreaked havoc during attack on Pearl Harbor, sunking many US battleships. Now let's have a look at the real devil here, and that is the A6M0. The A6M0 struck fear into any Allied pilots during the early stage of the Pacific War. The A6M0 is very fast, very maneuverable, and is a small target, so you have to be precise to shot one down. And the Zero, even though it's quite fragile to enemy fire and catch fire easily, you have to hit it first. The Zero have been equipped with two 7.7mm machine guns, and it also been equipped with two 20mm cannons, which mean it outgunned most of the Allied fighter and bomber armament at the time. The F4F Wildcat that seems to be the worthiest opponent at the time. Some variants have been equipped with only 4 12.7 machine guns, and some variant got 6 of it. Still, it still got outgunned by the Zero, and even worse, the F4F is inferior to the Zero in almost every way. One of the main advantage that the F4F actually have is its cockpit was well protected. Now that we have a look at the mobile force and their aviation, now let's have a look at the rest of the task force. Let's have a look at the main force. The main force acts as a headquarters. They control every task force in this battle. It has been commanded by Admiral Yamamoto. It is stationed aboard his flagship, the Yamato. Also, the Yamato have been guarded by several battleships and cruisers. And now let's have a look at the occupation force. The occupation force carried troops, so they were able to land on Midway Island. And the Northern force. The Northern force will act as a bait. They will attack the Aleutian Island, drawing the American away. After an attack on Pearl Harbor, the American Navy have done a counterattack on the Japanese mainland. They have launched a B-25 from a deck of the USS Hornet, a B-25 bomber commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle. They have bombed the Japanese city, but the damage wasn't really critical. But this caused the Japanese to be worried about the American Air Force and the Navy. So they plan to have air superiority by conquering more islands and getting more airfield in the Pacific. Their next target is the Midway Island. So they planned that they will attack the Aleutian Island with the Northern force. So the Northern force will act as the bait, and they will draw the American fleet away from Midway. But actually, this communication have been cracked down by the American. So now that the American know that they will attack the Midway Island, and also they will attack as the Aleutian Island as a bait, the American didn't fall for their trap, and they have sent 3 carriers to defend the island. Before the air raid started, the American PBY Catalina have spotted the invasion fleet. The invasion fleet is the fleet that the Japanese planned that after they have bombarded the island, they will send these invasion fleet up into the island and conquer the island. But the invasion fleet have been spotted. several B-17 heavy bombers have been sent from the Midway Island to bomb the Japanese ships. But actually none of the bomb hits. But still, after some time, the Americans have also spotted the Japanese main carrier fleet. They have launched several dive bomber, torpedo bombers, and fighters to attack the Japanese main fleet. The Japanese also launched their air raid against Midway Island. They have launched several Zero fighters. Also, they launched several Val and Kate dive bomber and torpedo bombers too. During an air raid on Midway, the American fighter and anti-aircraft gun were barely able to defend the island. Even though that several hospital, power plant and headquarters have been destroyed, still, the best thing that they still have is the airfield. The airfield is still operational and is still able to launch an aircraft to strike back. Still, the Japanese fleet are thinking about attacking the Midway Island again before the invasion force came. Right at that moment, the American bombers came. The American bombers sent from Midway Island attacked the Japanese fleet. They sent the Japanese into shock because they were worried about the American ships in the area. And how did the American plane from the island spot them so quickly? Because in reality, the Americans know where the Japanese will be already. Still, these aircraft couldn't do any damage to the Japanese at all because the Japanese aircraft were able to fend them off. Still, Admiral Nagumo have made his decision. He will attack Midway one more time to pave the way for the invasion force. But suddenly, one of the recon planes from his carrier spotted the American task force. One of the ships in the task force is a carrier. Nagumo was shocked by this. He thought that none of the carrier should be in the area at all, but he was wrong. Now he have to make a hard decision. Should he change a payload on his aircraft from bombs to torpedo, or should he just bomb Midway Island one more time and then attack the American carrier? He have to make this hard decision. What will he choose? We'll have a look at this in the next part of the Battle Midway, because I'm pretty sure at this point the video is 10 minutes long. I may be wrong when I edit it, but I'm gonna leave this in anyway. So we'll have a look at the second part of the Battle Midway, and I promise that the second part won't be as long to make as this one. So, I'm the Frontliner signing out. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.